So welcome back to my channel. This is Gamer Dom, and the shitstorm that is oh, Chrysler-gate, FochGate, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, seems to be continuing with even more vehemence and frankly nastiness going on all sides. And so I thought I'd do a little follow-up video. I did a video before the weekend talking about this issue. And look, before we go any further, I want this absolutely clear before I start talking anything else that might be deemed as being controversial. I think what Wargaming tried to do with Sir Foch and stop him saying what he thought about tanks was outrageous. Well, the lengths they went to. So, threatening copyright strikes against YouTubers is just ridiculous and should never, ever, ever have happened, frankly, full stop. And I think they recognise that they screwed that whole thing up really badly and handled it really badly. Now, I think also Sir Foch went too far. I think I know his style is very much of being very aggressive and very outspoken and blah blah blah, and that's what he likes to do, and that's how he likes to play, and that's apparently his sort of personality anyway, and that's fine, and that's, you know, if that's what you want to do. But it kind of went a little bit far. I mean, what was it, 90 seconds to a minute and a half of him just ranting and swearing. Personally, you know, maybe a bit old school, but I don't like that. I think it's just unnecessary and it invalidates your point, frankly. If you can't get your point over without effing and blinding, then, you know, really, you're losing the game. You're losing what you're talking about. So anyway, so I think he was wrong to say what he said, and then actually, if you read the transcripts of his conversations with Phelan, who's the chap from EU who apparently threatened to ban him, he acknowledges that he maybe went a little bit too far, and, you know, good on him for doing that. Now, the two things to me are completely, I mean, they're connected clearly, because it's all about power creep and the practices of wargaming at the moment. But to me, you know, Foch was wrong doing what he did and going as far as he did and being as, frankly, aggressive and rude as he was. Wargaming were actually even worse, even more wrong to do what they did and threaten copyright strikes against a YouTuber. That is just outrageous. And suggestion that it was because it was slanderous or what have you. I mean, look up the dictionary definition of slander. You know, just because you swear at somebody doesn't mean you're slandering them. And, you know, I think, so that's an absolute given. They were wrong. They should not have done it. And frankly, they handled the whole situation deplorably. Now, I won't go into my personal circumstances, but I've worked in public relations for 25 years, something like that. I know I'm younger than I look. No, I'm older than I look. So, you know, I know how to handle these kind of situations. I did crisis management on the 2012 Olympics. I've done this sort of shit for a long time. Now, the one thing we teach people when we're doing crisis management is do not attempt to cover up what you've done. If you've cocked up, say you've cocked up. Admit you've cocked up, apologise, and explain what you're going to do to correct it. Simple as that. Wargaming's first response to this whole saga was to try and make out that they didn't say as what they said, or they didn't threaten to copyright strike Sir Foch's channel, and then of course they were completely caught out by the fact that there was a transcript of their conversation, and everyone just duly put that up on their forums, and they had to go, actually, yeah, well, maybe that's how it looked, but that's not what we meant. Well, you know, it may not be what you meant, but that's what you said. And as I say, the way you do this in the game of crisis management is you admit you've screwed up and you do something about it. Now, what they should have said was, yes, we went too far, we shouldn't have said what we said. It was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. We're working with Foch to correct it, and we're sorry if that was how it came across. And people would have gone, fair enough, but trying to cover it up is just stupid. Anyway, and the problem is, what seems to have happened with this whole thing is that people have just jumped on the bandwagon of having a go about everything under the sun, rather than actually discussing the points, which were actually genuinely good points. At the end of the day, we know, and I've talked about this on this channel, my little channel, for some time, that the game has changed in not necessarily a good way in the last few months, 6 months or so. And we debated a couple of videos back, people in comment sections around when this all started, and I thought it was the Scorpion G, which was the first stage of it, but actually somebody pointed out it was probably actually further back. It was when the Berlin Quartet came in, because there you had 4 tanks that were brought into the game that were slightly better than everything that you could buy on the tech tree. And ever since then, they've changed the meta of the premium tanks from being slightly worse, but getting things like preferential matchmaking, to now being better, and in some cases considerably better than what you can get on the tech tree. And the reality is that's had an effect that you go into games now where a huge percentage of the teams are premium tank only. The tech tree's almost become a complete irrelevance. I don't think people mind about premium tanks. What they seem to be, well, this is the thing. This is what's difficult to. And I've read a lot of stuff over this weekend of people's comments, and when you get past the general ranting and hatred that there seems to be directed at wargaming for everything, it seems like fundamentally the main thing people are worried about is the fact that this is some sort of power creep, and people who don't deserve to have the tanks can just buy a tank. You haven't done your dues, and you can't. How dare you have a decent tank in your garage? And frankly, I think that's insulting for everybody who plays the game. We know there are people who have no business driving around in a tier 8 premium tank, but they bought it, and that's their money and that's their choice. And it gets me thinking about this whole process of pay to win, pay to play kind of thing. Now, why are people so worked up about this whole process? I mean, at the end of the day, everything else you do in life, pretty much, you have to pay for. I bought a game at the weekend from Steam, Viking Expedition, I think it's called, because I like the look of it and I fancied trying something different. And it cost me £25, something like that. I bought it, didn't think twice about it. I didn't moan about the fact it's not free. It's not free to play. I want a free game. Give it to me. Why should I pay? I bought a game. I paid for it. Is that so different from what Wargaming expected or would like us to do here? They've built a game, very successful game. They make a lot of money out of this game, but they also invest a lot of money in this game. You just think the server costs alone for this game, let alone all the developers and all the marketing and develop, all that kind of stuff. The sponsorship they do for all these events they run. It's not a cheap business. Maintaining a staff of people, even in sort of fairly cheaper places like Eastern Europe, it is not cheap to do. They have to make money. They have to make a profit. They want to make bigger profits. That is their right. They have an effective game, and frankly, I'm quite happy for them to make money. I want them to invest in the game I enjoy. I don't want it to stand still. I want them to continue to invest it. And yes, they get it wrong sometimes, definitely in terms of the development. I hate 918. I hate what they've done with artillery. I hate what they've done with preventing platooning of artillery. But I still love the game, and I still enjoy playing it. I play far too much of it. So is it wrong that people are being vilified for buying a tank? Yeah, nobody seems to care. People often, and I've seen them, people who are being absolutely vitriolic about other people. I've seen people suggesting team killing Chryslers on their team because how dare they buy them. But I know for a fact a couple of those people have Patriots or Libertés in the garage, exactly the same, or Defenders in their garage. So is it just that they're upset that their super OP premium tank is no longer super OP, or do they really have a valid point? And frankly, just suggestion of team killing somebody just because they bought a tank is just insane and ridiculous. There was somebody else saying, in my chats saying, in one of the videos I did, saying, I'm going to use all my reports every day to do an unsportsmanlike report on everybody I see driving a VK. Sorry, a Chrysler. And apart from the fact that I don't think Wargaming do anything with the reports of people in the game, it's the other thing is the fact that this guy is critical of Wargaming abusing or potentially abusing the YouTube mechanics to take out a copyright strike against a YouTuber on the basis of what they've said, and to complain about that you are going to abuse the World of Tanks reporting system. Just think about the irony there. Yeah. Anyway, so what was I saying? So, is it so bad for us to pay something towards the game? I paid when I first started to play this game several years ago. I didn't pay a sausage for it. I didn't, and like a large percentage, if you believe the numbers, a large percentage of people still do not pay anything for this game. They enjoy it, they play it well, or badly, who cares? At the end of the day, it's a game and they want to have fun, and they take their, it's their spare time and they enjoy what they're doing. Now, for those of us in the fortunate position who can pay money towards the game and are prepared to do it, why should that be a bad thing? At the end of the day, are part funding the success of this game, funding the investment that goes into the game. So, is that such a bad thing? And why is this suddenly, it's like people were putting insults in. I did a featured on Friday again, before all the shitstorm became apparent. I did a video featuring American replay of the Chrysler. It's the first one I'd seen getting an ace, and I thought it was a cracking game, showed the tank off really, really well, and I put it up, and I got all these comments about wallet warriors and God knows what else in it, and you go, well, so is that an insult, being a wallet warrior? I mean, if it wasn't for the money that we spent, you wouldn't have a game. Simple as that. So, screw you, basically. And this is this whole thing about getting something for free, I don't get. The other thing I don't really get is this whole bit about gold. So we talk about gold ammunition because back in the day, before I played the game, I think, or if I did, I didn't recognise the fact because I was such a noob. You used to have to buy premium shells, and they cost gold. Therefore, you had to buy money. You had to spend money. Buy money. You had to spend money to buy the gold shells you wanted to use. That isn't the case, and hasn't been for quite some time now. You can buy premium shells with credits now. So, where's the pay to win bit here? If you're a half decent player and comfortable playing tanks, you'll make a profit on pretty much every tank until you get up to 9 and 10, tier 9 and 10. You'll make a profit on pretty much every tank you drive. You don't have to have premium, don't have to have premium time. You don't have to have premium tanks. You can still generate some credits, enough credits to buy premium ammunition if that's what you want to do. It's a mechanic in the game. Frankly, I think there's too much of it. I would much rather see, say, 20% limit, so, you know, every tank can carry maximum of 20% premium shells. That, to me, would be an easy fix. But it's not like it is a gold shell anymore. You're not buying it with money. And people are moaning about people spamming gold. Well, do you think just because they took premiums out of the game, for whatever reason, there wouldn't be premium shells being fired? Of course there would. Because you're going to be able to generate credit. It bounced off an easy 8 with this thing. You would still be buying, or still be able to buy, premium ammunition to deal damage if you wanted to. So what's the problem there? So this whole kind of discussion around gold shells makes me laugh as well, because as I say, you don't need to spend money to buy a gold shell. You can buy gold shells with credits, and if you're a reasonably competent player at, say, tier 6 and tier 7, you can make a profit on pretty much every game you play. Well, in fact, every game you play, and therefore you can, if you wish, convert some of those credits into gold. I'm slipping into it now. Into premium ammunition. I'm a reasonable player at this game. Generally, my credit balance is around about 1 million, 2 million credits. I do have a lot of premiums, but then I also spend a lot of credits on buying far too many tanks to have in my garage, non-premium as well as premium. So this whole gold argument is a bit redundant. Now, the argument I do have a lot of sympathy for is this whole kind of idea that you only can pen certain tanks with gold shells. Now, let's address that. People have been moaning about this for as long as I can remember. Even before these premium tanks came out that are OP, or deemed to be OP, or OTT, or whatever you want to call them. At the end of the day, the problem has been more the mechanics of the game. The way, like here, that we're seeing here on Corellia, this is a corridor. The heavy tank here, the Chrysler sitting here at the end of this corridor, effectively dominates this whole section of the map. It's really, really hard for enemy tanks to push down against him, and it's almost impossible for them to pen him from here because he's angled. Look at the shots he's bouncing here. He's bouncing loads and loads of shells, and but then again, should they be able to? So at the end of the day, heavy tanks are heavy tanks because they have a lot of armor. That's their design. They are supposed to have a lot of armor. They're supposed to be able to go toe to toe with enemy tanks and duke it out. And the traditional kind of problem with taking on heavy tanks, the way to take on things like this, is by flanking them, by getting round and not taking them on frontally. Now, these guys against this Chrysler are just continuing to push. There's a Cromwell, there's a T-71. None of these guys have got any business being in the front line here. They should not be here. That T-71 is blocking the T-32. It's an AMX, an IKV, for goodness sake, lightweight TD. Now, part of the problem is people don't know how to play the tanks, and therefore you're kind of blaming the whole mechanics and failure of the game on the fact people don't know how to play the game and what they're supposed to do. Now, here's a heavy look at that, Cromwell coming out. Like, what the hell? He should be coming around and trying to flank. He should be trying to use his speed. Instead, there's this assumption that, I'm in any tank, can take on any tank. I'll just load my gold shells and I can take them on frontally. No, sorry, you shouldn't be able to. Now, I tend to agree that the Chrysler should have some weak points. Those machine guns that are on the front of the hull of this thing really should be weak spots, and I do not understand the logic that Wargaming didn't include them at all. Now, is that to encourage people to fire more gold shells at this thing? I also just discussed this. I don't believe so, because to me, you don't. It's not gold anymore. It's not like they're making huge amounts more money out of you because you happen to fire a couple of gold shells against the Chrysler. If you're a reasonable player, you've generated them through your normal games as credits, so you can afford to buy a few premium shells to fire. It's not like you're going in and saying, "Can I have today? I'm going to buy 20 gold shells. That'll cost me £5.50, please, Wargaming." At the end of the day, gold shells are premium shells. They're not gold shells. So, should you have a God-given right to pen the front of every tank you encounter in the game? In every tank you've got? I would say not. I would say not. Now, there are inconsistencies, and I haven't played the Chrysler yet, but people I've seen play it, and in fact one of the community contributors who did a video on this talked about the fact that you get ammo racked a lot, you get your engine knocked out a lot. The front plate is weak, and sure, you can try and hide the lower plate. The sides are very flat, so if people can flank you, they can take you down. Now, I'm not arguing that the Chrysler shouldn't have any kind of weak spots at the front. I actually think, say the machine guns on the front there, those two at the front, should be weak spots. Then the whole argument goes away, right? Then the whole argument goes away. And I, for one, would be very happy if Wargaming decided to, unlike their normal policy, amend this tank and put those weak spots in now. But the reality, and this is a debate I had around this whole Defender debate. So when the Defender came out, you had people ranting and raving about the end of the game, and this is the final straw, this is us all over. Hasn't died, has it? The game's still going very strong. According to the numbers, there's even more people playing it. So clearly it didn't kill it, and as usual, huge overreaction on the part of many people who love to, talk about the doom of everything. But the reality is, what was I talking about? Yeah, the Defender. In the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, it's a real brute of a tank. Absolute bugger to deal with. However, a decent player is like that in pretty much any tank they choose to drive. It's not just because it's the Defender. Now, the Defender has some serious limitations. The lower plate is really easy to pen. You saw in that sequence before, this Chrysler was aiming for the lower plate. It was pretty easy to pen it. The gun reload is incredibly slow. It's a fairly, it's not a bad mobility heavy, but it's relatively slow, and you can flank it. Now, when I see personally, when I see a Patriot coming towards me in a game, I'm not scared rigid of it. I don't think it's a completely OP tank. Is it a good tank? Yes, hell it is. The Patriot, the Defender, the Liberté, the Scorpion G, they're all really strong tanks. OP? No, I don't think so. OP is something that anybody could drive and would get a great result in. You can't judge an OP-ness of a tank, if that's the word, lovely shot, based on the fact that a Super Unicum is extremely good in it. On that basis, of Grant, for goodness sake, would be OP, because somebody like that could. So a Super Unicum can drive any tank well, pretty much. Somebody put in the comments and saying, "Oh, so Foch would beat you with a Challenger." And so, well, yeah, he'd probably beat him with a Grant. He's a damn good player. No argument from me. I'm not going to say that. So does that make the tank OP? Yeah, I don't think so. But hey, but it does seem like this whole meta of the game change has really got people rattled and annoyed, and it has me too. I would rather we saw bigger open maps where you can use the flanking ability of any tank to deal with the sort of the high armor values of these premiums. I also have absolutely no problem with Wargaming selling premiums and making them good. At the end of the day, why should I buy a crap product? You know, why should I buy a tank that is rubbish? What's the logic? Would you go into a shop or into, you know, buying a new car, and you go into a place and you go, oh, I'm not going to buy that one, it's too good. I'm going to have this one because it's not fair on everyone else who's driving around in a crappy old Clio. You know, so you know, just because people own a Jaguar doesn't mean that it's that they that everyone else should own a Jaguar, right? You know, at the end of the day, people have different disposable incomes, different levels of money, different values. They'll buy what they can afford and what they want. Should they be able to buy them? Of course they should. You know, if they earn the money and that's how they want to spend their money, then you knock yourself out. Just because of that, does that mean somebody else can moan and bitch and say, oh, you shouldn't buy that? Of course you shouldn't. Bullshit. I'm going to buy the best thing I can buy when I'm buying something because it's my money and I want to do it. So why should I be forced to buy a crappy premium, right? So I have no problem with premiums being better than they were, and indeed I would argue with the new matchmaking under 918, the preferential matchmaking tanks largely are dead. You know, they are so outclassed by other tier 8s at the moment that advantage they used to have, which was the fact that, you know, they could more often than not be facing lower tier tanks, is largely wiped out. You try driving a KV5 is one of my favourite tanks in the game. I absolutely adore playing it. I've barely played it under the new patch because every time I go out I'm in a solid 8 game and I can't bully anybody in it. It's just not bully. It's not a bully unless it's top tier. Against, you know, has a reasonable number of lower tier tanks to deal with, and so the value of that tank has been completely destroyed for me. Same with some of the other preferentials. So why is that right? Why is that right? Anyway, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not going to buy a tank just to be rubbish. Why should I? I'm spending my money. I want a decent tank. And now you could argue, how decent is it? Is it too decent? That's for sure. But is this tank any worse than the Patriot, than the Defender, than the Scorpion G? I'd say not. So if everybody who moans about this tank and how it shouldn't be allowed to be sold, are they quite happy to get rid of their Defenders and their Patriots and all those tanks that they've got in their garage? Because I know a lot of them have. I've spoken to a few of them. Oh, it's not fair. Oh, it's too good. It beats my premium too hard. Well, so is that the reason why you don't want it? Or because you're worried about the game mechanics? Bit controversial, I know. But, you know, it's Monday and I'm feeling that way inclined. And it's just some of the stupidity that was being discussed. And I know that people just love jumping on the bandwagon and, you know, this Foch off and all those things. But it's got to a stupid level. You know, you can't mention anything to do with the Chrysler without, in videos or anything else without people just going off on one. I've had people going off on one all weekend on my videos about it. And, you know... Everyone has their own opinion and they're entitled to that, but, you know, some of the conversation is just absolutely mind-numbingly stupid. And, you know, the people just swearing for the sheer hell of it. You know, I'm no prude, but I just don't get the point. What, you know, why just swearing just because you think it's big? You know, I'm old enough, I've got kids, and, you know, even when they were younger, they thought, you know, it doesn't make it big to swear. But some people think it does, so yeah, whatever. But, you know, that's my little take on this thing. To me, fundamentally, Wargaming overreacted and were out of order in trying to threatening to copyright strike Sir Foch for what he did with that video. However, I also think Sir Foch was wrong in how abusive he was in his video, but you know, that's how he is. But even for him, I watch his videos from time to time, and I don't much like them for that very reason. But even for him, he went OTT, and he acknowledged he did. If you look at the transcripts of the conversations, he acknowledged he went too far. Does not in any way justify Wargaming trying to threatening to copyright strike him. That's absolutely out of order, no doubt about it. And then for them to not to fess up about it and to try and suggest that oh no, we weren't trying to do that at all, is also outrageous. And they deserve, somebody deserves to lose their job, frankly, for it. I'm not a witch hunt type person, but somebody has screwed up in a big way, somebody who's publicly facing and should know better, frankly. Is there a problem with the game at the moment? Well, clearly not, because the numbers are still continuing to grow. Certainly in terms of their revenues, they're growing. People seem to love this way of doing it. People are spending money on premiums like you would not believe, just judging by the number of premiums you see on the battlefield. It must be true. Are there too many? I think so. I think it's gone too far. We're heading into a World of Warships kind of scenario where there are so many premiums. I mean, I lose track. I don't play World of Warships that often, but boy, are there premiums just so many. It seems like every day different ones come out. And that's too much. It really is too much for my liking. But if I'm going to buy a premium tank, I want it to be a good one. And I think, why shouldn't I be entitled to, it's my money and I want to have a decent tank. And I want it to be competitive. I don't want it to, and I think everybody is, as I said before, people have moaned and complained about every premium tank for the last, I don't know how many, how it's, OP and breaking the game and blah blah blah. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be, because more people are playing them than ever, playing the game than ever. And do we want to see games purely of premium tanks? Nope, we don't. I mean, at the end of the day, you could argue, why is that a problem? Why is it a problem if we only have premium tanks in the game? Just feels wrong. At the end of the day, I would rather we played the game, grinding tanks and working our way through tech trees. But for me, I barely ever bother anymore. There's a couple of tanks I'm grinding, but the rest of the time I'm quite happy to play my premiums. I get more credits, more profit, blah blah blah. So I don't know. The other thing I would say, I think, is this whole premium versus gold ammo. I'm same. I describe it as gold ammo, but it isn't gold ammo. It's premium ammo. You don't have to spend money to get it. You can just use credits, and you generate credits through playing well. If you play well, you'll get credits. You don't have to spend a bean if you don't want to. And that's the way it should be, frankly. It should be the fact that if you want to spend money on the game, then fine. It shouldn't give you a huge advantage. But you should get value for money, would be my argument. And, have we gone too far with the premiums? Do they go beyond adding value for money and just become OP? Well, you've heard my argument. I don't think any tank is OP unless in the hands of a complete no-hoper. They help you to win every game. To me, these tanks are very, very strong. Very strong. And in the hands of a good player, they are deadly. But then anything in the hands of a good player. Anyway, I know people aren't going to, not everyone's going to agree with me, but I just thought it's food for thought. I'd love to hear some comments down below, preferably if they're not all swearing at me. But, have I made any valid points there or not? Let me know down below. This is Gamer Dom signing out.